He was my instructor, my supervisor, the man who was supposed to turn me into a fighter. But instead, he became the person I feared losing most. And when the truth came out, it wasn't just the storm outside that exploded, but our lives as well. My first step onto campus was met with silence. Not the respectful kind, but the type that makes your stomach drop. I dragged my overstuffed duffel through the courtyard, boots squeaking like they were announcing my incompetence. I'd pictured this moment 100 times. Head high, confident stride, maybe even a firm handshake with my roommate and some witty line about destiny. Reality? My bag split open halfway up the stairs, socks and anxiety spilling across the tile like confetti for the funeral of my pride. Room 308. I forced myself to breathe and knocked once before stepping in. The room wasn't empty. Someone was already inside, standing by the window like he'd been sculpted out of steel and bad decisions. His posture was military to the bone. No slouch, no wasted movement. He turned slowly when I entered, and I froze like a kid caught trespassing. "You're late," he said. I blinked. "It's 5 minutes early." He glanced at his watch. "Then you're 5 minutes behind schedule. I'm Staff Sergeant Reed. You'll refer to me as Sir until you're no longer useless." I stood there like an idiot with my busted duffel and an ego bleeding out on the floor. "This is my room." He nodded once. "It is, and I'm your supervisor for the next 8 weeks. Welcome to training, cadet." Not roommate, not partner, supervisor. Every fantasy I had about camaraderie and shared struggle evaporated. "Put your gear down," he ordered. I scrambled to gather my spilled belongings, trying not to make it worse. I shoved the socks into a pile and dropped the bag onto the lower bunk. The mattress barely dipped. Reed watched every move like he was scoring a test I didn't know I was taking. "You fold like that in front of an inspector," he said. "You'll fail before you even open your mouth." I bit the inside of my cheek. "Good to know." "Don't talk unless asked," he snapped. Tension coiled in the air. I swallowed it. Reed crossed the room and slapped a paper onto the desk. "Schedule. Rules. Violate either, and I'll personally escort you off base." Then he turned back to the window like I'd already been dismissed. I sat in silence, the only sound my heartbeat thudding like footsteps in a hallway I didn't belong in. That night, sleep didn't come easy. I lay stiff on my bunk, listening to Reed breathing evenly above me, like he could control even that. Every inch of the room felt sharp-edged. There was no room for mistakes here, no space for softness, and definitely no room for me to be the version of myself I hadn't dared name. But things didn't snap until the first field test. We were 10 minutes into drills when I tripped over the edge of a combat mat, fell flat. Everyone saw. Reed didn't yell. Worse, he watched, silent, disappointed. Afterward, while the others joked in the locker room, I kept my head down. Reed passed behind me, cold voice brushing my ear. "You move like someone afraid of being seen." I flinched. "I'm not." "You are. Fix it." No advice, no encouragement, just that, a verbal scalpel. That night I scrubbed my boots until my fingers cramped, hoping clean leather could erase failure. It didn't. The week got worse. Reed never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His silence cut deeper than any insult. During drills, he'd watch from the sidelines. Expression unreadable, eyes fixed. I told myself I hated the attention, but every time he turned away, my stomach dropped like I'd lost something important. Late Thursday, after another brutal session, I came back to the room limping. My ankle had twisted during a sprint. Reed glanced at me, then said nothing. He went back to writing notes in his manual. I slumped onto the bed, wincing. After a moment, I heard him get up. A small med kit landed next to my knee. "Wrap it. Don't be an idiot." It wasn't kindness. It was function. Like changing a tire. I wrapped my ankle anyway. "Why do you care?" I asked, not expecting an answer. Reed stared at me for a moment too long. "Because if you break, I get blamed. And I don't fail." The logic was cold, but something in his voice wasn't. Something I couldn't name yet. Then Friday came, and everything shifted. Room inspections. I did everything by the book. Corners tight, mirror clean, desk cleared. When the officers came, they nodded through most rooms. Mine? Reed stepped aside, letting them in without a word. They barely glanced around before one of them barked, "Who left the locker unsecured?" I turned red. My lock was half turned, not clicked shut. Reed didn't flinch. "It's mine," he said calmly. They raised an eyebrow. "Yours, Sergeant?" "I take responsibility." That moment, tiny, silent, changed everything. He could have thrown me under the bus, but he didn't. That night I stared at the ceiling, wondering what kind of person covers for someone like me. Eventually I asked, "Why did you do it?" He didn't look up from his book. "Because you'll repay the favor. You'll become someone worth covering for." And for the first time since I stepped onto campus, I believed I might. We didn't talk about the inspection again. Reed never brought it up, and I never thanked him. Not directly, but I stopped fumbling. I trained harder. I showed up early. I triple-checked my locker every night. If he'd taken a hit from me, I wasn't going to give him a reason to regret it. But the more I tried to prove myself, the more aware I became of him, not just as a superior, but as a presence, a constant one, in drills, in the mess hall, in the room we shared. He was always there, and I couldn't ignore how my pulse changed when he stood too close, how my thoughts twisted in directions I'd spent most of my life trying to suppress. It was easier when I was tired. Pain muted things. After takedown practice one evening, my wrist throbbed from an awkward fall. I iced it under the flickering hallway light, teeth clenched. Reed walked past, stopped, and turned back. "Wrist! I'm fine." He didn't argue, just gestured for me to follow. Inside the room, he pulled out the med kit again and motioned for me to sit. I hesitated, then offered my arm. He wrapped it tightly, each movement firm and certain. I watched his hands, the way they moved with discipline, not hesitation, but his touch. It wasn't cold. It was careful. "You always act like you've got something to prove," he said, not looking up. I shrugged. "Don't we all?" His gaze flicked up. "Some of us are just trying to survive." The silence stretched, then softer, almost too soft to catch. "You're not the only one here pretending." That landed harder than any drill. I didn't ask what he meant, didn't dare, but my breath caught anyway. Later that night, sleep came in fits. The room was quiet, but my thoughts weren't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his hands. Not rough, but steady. Not dismissive, but deliberate. The next morning, things were normal again, or so I told myself. Reed woke at 0500 on the dot, same as always. His routine didn't waver. Mine, however, cracked. As I tried to tighten my tie, fingers fumbling for the third time, Reed finally sighed and stepped in front of me. "Stop moving." I froze. He reached up, adjusted the knot with brisk precision. His knuckles brushed against my throat. The contact was brief, clinical, but it didn't feel that way. When he stepped back, I caught his eyes in the mirror. For a second, he didn't look like a drill sergeant. He looked like a man fighting something. "Better," he said, voice flat again. But that second stayed with me. Training ramped up. Stress built. Sleep became optional. Everything blurred into sweat and commands. And then came the hostage drill. The last time I'd done it, I'd shot the cardboard hostage right in the chest. This time I entered slow, focused, cleared the corners, breathed like he taught me. When I squeezed the trigger, the threat dropped clean. The hostage remained untouched. No cheers, just a nod from the evaluator. But when I exited the training room, Reed was waiting, arms crossed, face unreadable. "You didn't choke," he said. "High praise." "You still hesitated." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. "You're getting better," he added lower. "Don't let anyone make you believe you're not." My chest tightened at the weight of his words. It wasn't just instruction. It was permission. To try. To believe I could belong here. That night the storm rolled in. Thunder cracked overhead as I lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Reed sat on his bunk, back straight, jaw tight. The flashlight was off. The rain hit the windows in waves. "You okay?" I asked. He didn't answer at first, then, "I hate storms." I remembered what he'd said once, about doors slamming, noise, childhood shadows. I sat up. "You don't have to deal with it alone." His head turned toward me. I couldn't see his expression, but I felt something shift. He stood, crossed the room, and without a word pushed my bunk closer to his. The metal frames groaned but held. We sat across from each other in the narrow space, knees almost touching. The air felt charged, like everything we hadn't said was pressing in at once. "You think this is a good idea?" I asked. "No," he said, "but you're doing it anyway." "I've crossed harder lines," he said. "This one, I haven't. Yet." The quiet held like breath between two people who knew the next move would mean everything. Then slowly, he leaned in. We didn't kiss. Not yet. But the space between us disappeared. I could feel his breath. My heart thundered harder than the storm outside. And just when I thought the silence would break, someone knocked on the door. Sharp, sudden, 3 times. We both jerked back. He stood so fast the chair scraped the floor. "Occupied," he called out, voice steady again. I didn't move. Couldn't. When he turned back to me, his face was unreadable. "You should review your weapon checklist," he said. "Inspection's coming." And just like that, the moment was gone, but not forgotten. We didn't talk about the knock, didn't mention how close we'd leaned in, didn't say anything about the breath we shared or the heat that lingered between us afterward. Reed went back to being sharp-edged and unreadable. I followed his lead, pretending I hadn't almost done something that would have broken every rule in the book. But pretending didn't make it go away. The following days felt longer. Every shared glance was a landmine. Every brush of shoulders a spark. We trained harder, spoke less. The space between us wasn't distance. It was loaded silence. During drills, I caught myself watching him instead of the targets. During meals, I chose tables further away. It didn't help. My head was full of unfinished sentences. I don't know what would have happened if he hadn't pulled back first. I don't know what I would have done if he hadn't said inspection's coming. Maybe that's what scared me most, that I wanted him not to stop. Then came night duty, a quiet shift, just the two of us, assigned to patrol the perimeter together. No audience, no distractions, just boots on gravel and 100 unsaid things between us. He walked with hands in his pockets, gaze focused ahead. I matched his pace, heart hammering. "You still mad?" I asked finally. He didn't look at me. "About what?" "The other night." "No." I waited. He didn't add anything. We walked a few more steps. "But you pulled back," I said. "That's called control." "And this?" I gestured vaguely between us. "Whatever's been happening." He stopped walking. The silence pressed against my ears. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I can't afford to be reckless." "I'm not asking you to be." "You're asking me to make a choice," he said, "and I don't get to do that here. Not yet." It wasn't anger in his voice. It was weight, responsibility. I wanted to tell him I understood, but I didn't. Not really. He turned away and we walked the rest of the shift without another word. Back in the dorm, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, counting every breath. I told myself I'd imagined it. The closeness, the tension, the almost. But I couldn't forget the way he'd looked at me in the half-dark, like he was trying not to want something, like he already did. The next morning, training hit hard. Obstacle course, rifle drills, takedown practice. By the time we reached the simulation room, my body ached. Hostage recovery. Again. The same scenario I'd failed twice before. I braced myself, cleared the room, and fired. 1, 2, 3. No hostage casualties. Not perfect, but clean. Still, Reed's voice cut through the after-action review. "You flinched at the door." I was adjusting my stance. "You hesitated." I corrected. "You hesitated," he repeated more firmly. I snapped. "You keep saying that like I'm scared." "You are." "I'm not." "You're scared of being seen," he said quietly. "Same as me." The room was quiet. Too quiet. I clenched my jaw. "That doesn't make me weak." "No. It makes you human," he said, softer now. I turned away before my expression could betray me. That night, he came back to the dorm later than usual, said nothing as he entered. I sat at the desk, flipping through training manuals, though I hadn't read a single word. He dropped something on my side of the table. A note. 1 sentence. "You don't have to keep running." My chest tightened. I stared at the paper for a long time, then finally looked up. I don't know what you want from me, I said. He didn't hesitate. I want you to stop pretending you don't feel it too. We stood there, both breathing too hard for how little had been said. Finally, I asked, and if I don't? Then I'll back off, he said. No pressure, no retaliation, just honesty. I folded the note once, twice, slid it into my locker without a word. Then I stepped closer. Close enough to feel the tension in the air crackle between us again. Then don't back off, I said. His jaw twitched. We didn't kiss. Still. But I felt something settle, like we'd both stopped lying, at least to ourselves. The next morning, I found a cup of coffee on my side of the desk. Real coffee, not the instant garbage we'd suffered through for weeks. I didn't ask where he got it. I didn't have to. The note under the cup just said, "For the one who didn't flinch." And that was the first time I smiled before 600 since this place began. After the coffee, things got easier and harder. We never said anything about what we were doing. There was no label, no definition, just silence that wasn't empty anymore. But silence can only hold so much weight before it starts to crack. It started with a look, one of the other instructors. During drills, he glanced from Reed to me and back, eyes narrowing just slightly. It was small, barely a flicker, but I felt it, like a current under the surface. After that, Reed changed. Not to everyone else, only with me. He started keeping more distance. His corrections got sharper. In the mess hall, he sat at the opposite end. In the dorm, he came in late, left early, nothing hostile, just absence. I didn't ask what was going on. I didn't have to. Something was coming, and he was preparing for it. The real hit landed 2 days later. I got pulled from morning training, brought into an office I'd never seen. 2 officers waited, no names, no smiles. "We're conducting a routine review of instructor-cadet boundaries," one said. "Okay," I said slowly. "You've spent a significant amount of time under Staff Sergeant Reed's supervision. That's the assignment." A pause measured. "Has he ever made you uncomfortable?" "No." "Has there ever been inappropriate contact between you and Sergeant Reed?" The words sat there like a loaded weapon. I didn't blink. "No." The questions kept coming, cold, precise, designed not to accuse, but to trap. When I walked out, my uniform felt too tight, like the air around me had changed. Back at the range, Reed didn't look at me, didn't speak, just handed me a clipboard and walked away. Later that night, I found him sitting alone outside the dorms, staring into nothing. I sat down beside him without asking. "They talked to me," I said. "I know," he replied, no surprise in his voice. "Did they talk to you?" He didn't answer, but that was answer enough. I looked straight ahead. "We were careful." "Careful isn't invisible," he said quietly. "Not here." A gust of wind kicked up dust. Somewhere a door slammed. He didn't flinch, but I did. "You think it's over?" I asked. "No, but it's changing." His fingers curled around the edge of the bench, like he was holding on to something slipping. I wanted to reach for his hand. I didn't. Instead, I said, "What do we do now?" His reply came slow. "We don't give them more ammunition." "So we stop?" "No," he said firmly. "We stay smart." But smart meant space, silence, disconnection. For the next few days, Reed became a shadow. He trained like nothing had happened, barked orders like always. No flickers of softness, no notes, no coffee, just cold efficiency. And I followed suit, at least on the outside. But every time someone laughed too loud when I walked past, every time someone glanced too long, I felt it building. Pressure, rumor. The kind that didn't need proof, just whispers. The dorm turned tense. One night I caught Reed packing a small bag. Not enough to leave, just enough to make someone wonder. I leaned against the doorway. "You planning on disappearing?" "No," he said, not turning around. "Just being ready." "For what?" "For whatever they try next." I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me. "You're not alone in this." He faced me, tired, not physically, something deeper. "I can handle losing my rank," he said. "I can't handle you getting hurt for this." "You're not responsible for me." "Yes," he said quietly, "I am." That landed like a punch I hadn't seen coming. I shook my head. You don't get to decide that. He looked away, jaw tight. We knew the risk, I added. We chose it anyway. Doesn't mean I stopped trying to protect you. I didn't ask for that. You didn't have to. For a second, we stood frozen, caught between what we wanted and what the system demanded. Then softer, almost broken. I spent years learning how to hide. You made me want to stop. Silence. I don't know how to be anything else, he said. You don't have to know yet, I told him. You just have to not run. He looked at me like he wanted to believe that, like maybe he already did. Later that night, the base went dark. Power outage. Emergency lights flickered in the hall. Somewhere down the corridor, someone cursed. In the dorm, it was quiet. Reed sat on his bunk. I sat on mine. No words. The shadows between us felt different this time. Not a threat, not a secret. Just two people waiting for the world to make up its mind. Eventually he stood, crossed the room, paused in front of me. No commands, no orders. Just the sound of rain starting to tap the window. Then low. Still with me? I nodded. And this time I didn't hesitate. The investigation didn't end. It got quieter. Worse. No more questions. Just the feeling of eyes on our backs. Of doors falling silent when we passed. Reed didn't talk about it, and neither did I, but every day felt like standing under a falling ceiling, waiting to see if we'd get crushed or just bruised. Then 3 days after the blackout, Reed was gone. Not missing. Transferred. Without warning. Without a word. I found out from a printed memo taped to the common board. Staff Sergeant Reed reassigned pending review. I stared at the paper long after I stopped reading it. That night I sat on my bunk, not moving. The room felt wrong, like something essential had been torn out of it. I kept waiting for him to walk in, drop a sharp comment, hand me a checklist. Nothing. I told myself to focus, stay in the program, keep my head down, but I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Next morning I was called into the CO's office. No smile, no greeting. Cadet, you're being moved to a different unit. Because of Reed? The officer's expression didn't change. This is an operational decision. I clenched my fists. He didn't do anything wrong. You're not being punished, he said flatly, but from this point forward, your interactions with Staff Sergeant Reed are to remain strictly non-contact. That's an order. I walked out without replying. I didn't trust my mouth not to say something that would get me expelled. That evening, I packed my things. Everything was sterile again. Quiet. No evidence of what had happened between us. Just empty space. But when I opened my locker, I found it. A folded note tucked beneath the extra laces of my boots. They can move me, but they don't get to erase this. Not unless you let them. I sat down on the edge of the bunk, gripping the paper like it was the only solid thing left. Later that week, I saw him, across the yard during final drills. He was in a different uniform now. Different unit. Different everything. But still him. Our eyes met for half a second, and I knew. He wasn't going to reach out. Not while they were watching. Not unless I did first. I had a choice. Let it end the way they wanted, clean and buried, or do something messy. Something real. So I broke formation. Didn't run. Just walked, straight across the line of cadets toward him. I heard someone call my name. I didn't stop. Reed stood his ground. He didn't move. Just waited. When I reached him, I didn't say much. Just, I'm not letting them decide what this was. His mouth twitched. Not a smile. Not yet. You could lose your place here, he said. Then maybe this place doesn't deserve me. For a second, nothing. Then he nodded, just once. He didn't touch me. Didn't speak again. But his eyes were clear in a way I'd never seen before. And that was enough. Security came before I made it back to the line. They didn't yell. Just walk me to the office again. This time the tone was different. You made a public display, the CO said. I made a decision, I replied. You're dismissed from the current unit pending further review. I expected that. He paused. You could appeal. Not going to. He leaned forward. This won't end your career unless you let it. I looked him straight in the eye. I'm tired of letting everyone else decide what I'm allowed to feel. He didn't respond, just nodded toward the door. I walked out, no uniform on my back, No future in my pocket, but something else. Something heavier and lighter all at once. Freedom. Outside, Reed was waiting near the edge of the lot. When he saw me approach, he didn't ask anything. Just opened the door of his car. "You still sure?" he asked once we were on the road. "I've never been more sure of anything." He nodded. We drove in silence for a while. But it wasn't like before. This one felt shared. Eventually I asked, "Where are we going?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "Somewhere they don't own." That night we stayed at a cheap motel off a quiet road. No uniforms, no ranks, no eyes. Just two people with nothing left to hide. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. There was no ceremony, no dramatic declarations. Just this. When I reached for his hand, he didn't pull away. When I said, "They can take the job," he replied, "They can't take what matters." We didn't sleep much. Not because of fear, but because for the first time in months we didn't have to.